Hey there, Blue Mages, Liam here, and welcome to the Blue Academy Raid Guide for the Burden of the Father, or A4S Savage. This is the first fight in the Alexander raids for the Morbol mount, and it's actually quite a fun one. At the time of its release, this fight was extremely difficult with lots of convoluted mechanics, but with eye level advantage and some blue magic trickery, we can make it a whole lot easier. In this video, I'll cover the mechanics you can expect to see in a clear with our current spells as of Stormblood, but for an exhaustive list of all mechanics and the most up-to-date strategies, click the link for the written guide in the video description below. Let's get started. For this fight, I recommend the standard 1 tank, 2 healer, 5 DPS Mimicry setup. You can swap out 1 healer for an additional DPS to help skip mechanics, but it is a little bit riskier. As far as utility spells go, a couple of the DPS should take Mighty Guard and White Wind. There are scenarios in the fight where the tank or both healers may be separated from the group, so it's important that those jobs are covered. You will also want to bring an ability with a stun effect, such as Bomb Toss, so that you can stun the legs when they cast Perpetual Ray. The basic idea for this fight is that we want to kill all 4 legs and then Manipulator. Mechanics for the fight change based on the number of legs killed so far. The order in which we kill legs does not matter, and when 1 leg is killed, all other legs are healed to full, so it's important to focus on 1 at a time. Throughout the entire fight, the party should stay away from the tank to avoid splash damage from Hydrothermal Missile. The first leg is really easy, we'll just have some DPS Moonflute and we'll kill it before anything actually happens. Each time we kill a leg, all legs become untargetable and Manipulator becomes targetable. After a few seconds of damaging Manipulator, it will cast Mortal Revolution before becoming untargetable again and starting the next leg phase. Heal up and move on to leg 2. Shortly after this phase starts, 2 players will be kidnapped by Quarantine. If the tank gets taken, someone will have to use Mighty Guard to tank until they return. If both healers get taken, others will have to help heal with White Wind. Quarantined players will return to the arena after killing a robot ad. Throughout this phase, Manipulator will use Carnage. The targeted player should stand still and others should intercept lasers to make sure the targeted player will survive. Players should also spread out so they don't overlap the small AoE damage from Carnage. From this point on, keep an eye out for legs blowing off steam. This signals that they are about to cast Perpetual Ray and zap player's MP. Simply stun the leg to interrupt the cast. There will be another Manipulator Mortal Revolution intermission here before we go on to the third leg. This is a good opportunity to use Cold Fog to get some extra damage right at the start of the phase. The third leg is when things start getting a little bit spicier. Manipulator will continue casting Carnage, so just be ready to intercept the lasers as needed. The main mechanic of this phase is the doll phase. 1 large Straff Doll will spawn in the center of the arena, and 3 small Jag Dolls will spawn, 1 in the east, 1 in the west, and 1 in the south of the arena. If a Jag Doll gets close to the Straff Doll will eat it and deal raid-wide damage based on how much health the Jag Doll has. To handle this, we have the tank pick up the Straff Doll and assign 1 DPS to each of the Jag Dolls. The Straff Doll doesn't hit super hard, but it does apply a slash vulnerability up debuff, which can mostly be ignored since we should only see 1 doll phase here. The Straff Doll also cleaves, so it should be faced away from the party. The Jag Dolls don't hit very hard and are easy to deal with. DPS needs to damage the Jag Doll down to about 20 or 30% and then bring it in to feed it to the Straff Doll. The feeding of Jag Dolls should be staggered to allow for healing between explosions. If a DPS accidentally kills a Jag Doll, a new one will respawn. The Straff Doll should be killed once it has eaten all 3 Jag Dolls. If this whole process takes too long, Straff Doll will cast Whirlwind and zap everyone's MP to 0. You still want to keep an eye out for legs blowing off steam, as Perpetual Ray will still cast during the ads phase. Nothing else really happens for the rest of the phase, but if we take too long, then we will see another doll phase, but that's really unlikely. Once we kill the leg, we just have another intermission phase before we go on to leg number 4. At the beginning of this phase, Judgment Nisi will be cast. 1 player will be targeted by Red Nisi and 1 targeted by Blue Nisi. This is a debuff that has a small damage over time effect, and if you collide with another player, it passes the debuff onto them. If a player holds both debuffs at the same time, they die immediately. So we want to spread out to make sure that we're not passing the debuff back and forth. During this phase, we also have a doll phase, which we handle exactly the same way as before, only being extra careful to not pass Nisi. You can actually see we get really lucky here and we pass the Nisis as the first one is falling off. So you can see I do have both debuffs very briefly, but I actually live. I would not rely on this happening though. The next thing that we have to deal with is small discoid. One player will be targeted, which is indicated by a purple circle over their head, and then 3 sets of 3 orange orbs will spawn around the room and slowly move towards that targeted player. Players should intercept these orbs, without killing themselves, to prevent the targeted person from getting hit by all of them. At this point the phase will cycle, but really we should be almost done with the phase and you shouldn't see any repeated mechanics. We then have our final intermission phase, where Manipulator becomes untargetable during the Mortal Revolution cast. Afterwards, Manipulator becomes targetable for the remainder of the fight. This phase combines most of the mechanics from previous phases together and augments some of the abilities to make it extra spicy. The first thing we will see in this phase is Carnage 0. This is similar to Carnage, but we won't actually see tethers. Random players just get hit by the AoE, so we need to spread out to avoid overlapping damage. The next mechanic is Small Discoid, same as before, followed by Big Discoid. Big Discoid is going to be a large purple orb that deals big AoE damage, but it's split between the people hit. Damage mitigation such as Mighty Guard and Diamondback does not work, so you do need to split this with as many people as possible. However, the tank should not stack because the Big Discoid also applies a physical vulnerability up debuff. After handling Discoids, we have to deal with Royal Pentacle. This is a pretty complicated mechanic that is supposed to involve passing Nisi back and forth. Instead, we will completely disregard that and cheese it. 6 steam regulators will spawn in the center of the arena. They explode when touched by a player, killing that player. If left up too long, they will explode and wipe the raid. To handle this, we assigned 3 DPS to sprint and jump such that they blow up 2 regulators each. They will die, and then get resurrected, and Royal Pentacle is done. With enough DPS, you can actually skip Royal Pentacle entirely, and this is where you might want to consider swapping to 1 healer and 6 DPS mimics. But overall, it's really not that bad of a mechanic to handle. Manipulator's sting percentage is around 30% or so, and this should happen shortly before or after Royal Pentacle. Keep in mind that if you do Royal Pentacle, you will have 3 DPS with weakness, so just take that into consideration. At about 35 or 40%, everyone should Moonflute, unload all their primal spells, and then finish with a whistle-buffed final sting. You can actually see here, this was a particularly sloppy run, and for some reason we ended up getting a doll phase and going with the dolls instead of just stinging Manipulator, so just be aware that if your DPS is behind, you will have to deal with dolls again before being able to sting. Overall, this is a really easy fight, and it's definitely feasible to get it done via Party Finder. As always, thanks for watching, and best of luck with your Morbol hunt.